It's the Raj and Drew show for entrepreneurs. We are so happy that you're joining us here today. And we are going to talk about emotional intelligence and really what is the significance of emotional intelligence in the life of an entrepreneur. So Raj, I'm going to start with that question. Really, what is the significance? Why should an entrepreneur care about emotional intelligence? I thought I just have to have an idea. I go out here and I just make things happen, right? That's really the life of an entrepreneur, right?
Yes. But if you really go back and look at it, until 30, 40 years ago, whenever Daniel Goleman started talking about emotional intelligence, everybody focused on IQ. If you really look at it from an IQ perspective, every single person from MIT, Stanford, all the Ivy League schools, everybody should be outstandingly successful. Yes, we have some people very, very successful, but not every single person.
Okay.
But at the same time, if you flip the coin, there are so many people who are coming from some small colleges, a lot of entrepreneurs without any college education, but they are very, very successful. And that is where the emotional intelligence piece really comes into picture.
Okay.
So emotional intelligence, almost based on Goleman's research, is 2 times more important than IQ. That is the research which Daniel Goleman was talking about.
Wow. Okay. Well, so let's back up. Let's define emotional intelligence. I mean, maybe we've seen that Disney movie, you know, with the different emotions of people. What is emotional intelligence? How would you define emotional intelligence, or how would you define it for the entrepreneur?
So if you look at it from a definition of an emotional intelligence, it is all about awareness.
Okay.
There are several components within the emotional intelligence. So the first one would be is self-awareness.
Okay.
In the self-awareness is how well do you understand yourself? And the second part of it is, one is understanding ourselves, reading what is happening within our body, within our mind, within different situations. And the second is, how well are we able to regulate it? It is called self-regulation.
Okay.
So there are
if I'm losing my cool all the time, if I'm yelling at my team members, then I'm don't have the self-control part of the self-awareness. Maybe I'm aware of it, but I'm not able to modulate that or regulate it. Yeah, regulate that. Okay.
Exactly.
Okay.
So basically, there are some people who are very, very comfortable. They have a very, very heightened awareness, but they cannot regulate that.
Okay.
There are some people, basically, they're not aware of it. And they're much more spontaneous. If you look at some people, at least in the corporate world, when I was working in the corporate, there were certain people where there's always an outburst. At that time, I didn't know much about emotional intelligence. I didn't know. But if I know the tools I know today, I would have given them some advice. In a couple of hours, I would have given him a direction to go back and help improve those relationships.
Yeah. So tell me an example of maybe a client that's come to you that at the end of the day, maybe they came to you for some symptoms of problems, or maybe they were brought to you because they had some challenges and whoever they reported to brought you in, or maybe their team said, hey, you need to get a coach because you've got some issues, and you come in, you show up, Raj, and they say, here are the problems. They lose their cool or whatever the case is. Give us a scenario. What's an example of an entrepreneur that you've worked with that once you sat with them for an hour or 2 hours, a few sessions, you recognize, wow, this is an emotional intelligence issue?
Yeah. So I will give you an example of an entrepreneur. Basically, It was a growing company and they grew almost to 25 employees.
Okay.
And then what happened was the number 2 person basically became the number 1 person because it was a father and son company. The father slowly retired.
Okay.
And the son took over the business. Both of them were involved in the business for almost 15, 20 years.
Wow.
So what happened when the son was coming, and within 2 to 3 months, slowly they started losing people. And what was happening there was basically their experienced people who have been there for quite some time were leaving. And then basically one of them said, Raj, you need to talk to the new president who the son was being the president of the company. And I went and spent some time in looking at it. So there were a couple of things that we noticed in the 1 hour. I'm going to cut it short for you. Is this guy was very, very smart. IQ was very high. And he was expecting that everybody's IQ was so fast. So when he tells somebody, he was expecting everybody to go back and really understand that and act on that. And when people were not acting like he was acting, he was not able to regulate his feelings, and he just comes out like an outburst.
Okay.
In a regular sitting, people would have not misunderstood. Since he was the owner's son and now he's the new boss, people reacted very different. And for him, he didn't even have the awareness of it.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. There was no awareness that even awareness of others and capacity and understanding or reading facial expressions that says, I don't understand. In that moment, the self-aware leader or the other aware leader would say, do you understand what I'm saying? Do I need to further explain the vision that I have for the organization? So there's a lack of awareness. And then there was also, it's almost a double whammy. Then there's the lack of self-regulation.
Exactly. And basically, in that 90-minute session, I realized that there were certain points when I was talking to him, I could see his body language because he was with me one-on-one and he just got the heightened awareness. His body language said he wanted to go back and have an outburst, but he was controlling it. And it was very interesting because what has happened is whenever I asked him to explain it 3 or 4 times, he was not able to regulate it.
Okay.
So what we could pinpoint and show him saying that is, you're very, very smart. And second, this is your idea. So you would know that very, very well. Though I'm a coach, I have a lot of experience and everything else. I was trying to understand your idea. That is the only intention I was asking you the questions. And I wanted to get into the detail of where I can understand from my level. And that is where we could go back and identify the self-awareness piece of it within him and the self-regulation piece of it.
Wow. So he got frustrated with you because you were just trying to understand the idea that he was not able to communicate to his team, and he was getting frustrated. Wow. Okay, that's interesting. That's when you go, it goes back to the whole thing, if I have a problem with you, Raj, and I have a problem with somebody else, and I have a problem with another person, maybe I'm the problem, right?
Exactly.
maybe, I'm not very good at communicating what I'm trying to say. If nobody can understand what I'm trying to say, maybe it's not them, it's me. That's a great litmus test for self-awareness right there.
And he was really surprised because this didn't show up for the last few years when his father was involved with the business.
Okay.
And it came to the surface because immediately they all perceived that he's the boss, and the perception was different. So sometimes even that relationships and the trust also plays in a role.
Okay.
But the biggest part of it is, are you aware of it? Are you able to understand yourself and see the feelings that are going inside? And then are you able to regulate it or not?
Yeah.
So 2 different components we need to look at.
Yeah. Well,
and the third.
Oh, go ahead.
No, go ahead. Finish that.
So what I was going to ask was, how does it factor in? I've heard it said that none of us are really self-aware outside of others making us aware and giving us feedback. How much does being receptive and open to feedback elevate a person's self-awareness? Does that factor into a person's ability to be self-aware?
That plays a very big role when your listening skills are good.
Okay.
See, there are a lot of people who want to go back and do the feedback sessions, but they don't listen. So that is something which I have seen a lot in the entrepreneur world. And I say, whenever, especially in the entrepreneurs who are in the early stages of their business, when I say early stages, they have 5 employees, 10 employees, 20 employees, 30 employees. During this stage, they're wearing multiple hats.
Yeah.
And when you're wearing multiple hats, they are processing information much faster than the average person. And they forget that this is their passion for starting a business, but the people they're bringing in, they're not entrepreneurs, they're wonderful employees. Their motivation is very different. That would be the disconnect.
That's great. Well, the image I got in my mind too is it's like a feral cat, being brought into a home. You have this wild cat that, goes out and hunts and does what, kills whatever it finds in the barn. And now you're trying to bring it in with, to a community to work with others. And that's almost like the entrepreneur out on their own. And then now they realize, I can't do this all by myself. I have to bring in other people and create a community. And if you're not experienced in that, or you don't have a background in leadership or management or working with other people, that could be a very difficult transition for folks.
Yes. And as an entrepreneur, if you go to a stage 4 company, which we define as between 35 and 55 employees, what happens is you are big enough that you need to bring in systems.
Okay.
And for the entrepreneur, without the emotional intelligence, he will be treating the people he has been working with since he started as a 5-employee company the same way as the new people who are coming in at stage 4, because the company has grown and brought a new people. These people have already understood him. Basically, 5 employees, 10 employees, they have been him for whatever time period he was.
Yeah, they have context to whatever.
But the new person is not. And the new person is being bought because of their skill. They have been there, done that. They have implemented the things, whatever they're bringing for their expertise. So now if you don't have that awareness, you're going to drive these people away because they're coming with a lot of expertise and experience from the outside world.
Okay.
So definitely the self-awareness and the regulation piece of it will be very, very important in building the gap, basically from a communication point of view and the effectiveness of the relationship point of view.
Yeah, and it sounds like the need for emotional intelligence is only going to grow. It's never going to get smaller. You aren't going to grow to a place where you don't need emotional intelligence anymore.
No.
You can survive on the early days without it because you aren't working with other people. And we talked about businesses get more complicated, not when there's more money or bigger contracts, but when there's more people in the mix.
Exactly.
And so from a leadership perspective, from an entrepreneur's perspective, as they try to lead an organization into a place of growth, they need their skill sets, emotional intelligence wise, need to grow with that. So what can you do? Let me say it this way. If you're unclear on the value of emotional intelligence to the entrepreneur, it's a lid, right? It's a lid to your growth organizationally.
Yes.
If you don't have this person in place, sure, you might find somebody that's willing to put up with you and they can temper your message and be your operations person. You might get lucky with that, but you still need to be able to have those skills to communicate to the people that you have to communicate on a regular basis, let alone shareholders if you begin to grow and have a board that you report to. So let's talk early stage, 5 employees, 10 employees. I'm out here, I'm making my way. What kind of tips would you give to that person on how to develop their emotional intelligence as the organization grows? So they can kind of start there. We can get to higher level stuff, but where do you start with growing your emotional intelligence?
See, you bring up a very good and important point. When you have 5 employees, 7 employees, 10 employees, what happens? You're having a lot of day-to-day interactions, almost several interactions with them on a regular basis. So eventually everybody will know this is what Drew is. Even let us say I don't regulate myself and I'm yelling at somebody.
Yeah.
They know that I didn't mean it because after an hour I come back and I'm calm and I talk to them very well. So they develop the relationship and it is very comfortable for everybody to say, you know what, this is how Raj is. This is how Drew is.
Yeah.
He doesn't mean anything bad. But
there's
when you have
context to it.
Exactly.
There's relationship that's there.
Yes. So, and most of the time when you are new to the business, who do you bring as part of it? You are going and bringing up people, you are more of your friends or somebody whom you trust. And there's some sort of a context and a relationship already there. That way you have a lot of advantages. This might not show up as bad as what it is. But when you have 25 employees, you don't have the day-to-day interactions.
Yeah.
And when you bring in people, you're bringing some high-powered people. Let us say you're growing fast and you want an outstanding salesperson. You might bring in an experienced person from the outside. But that person would not understand your behaviors, understand your regulation piece of it and the outbursts that go with that.
Well, and if they're really good at their job, then they don't have to put up with you.
Exactly.
Right?
Exactly.
They can go find another job. That's the best employees can quit very quickly if you are not a great person to work with or work for. So that's always something to keep in mind.
Very, very important. Very, very important. That's what I tell people. When people are living and turnover, I tell to go back and look at it and say, how many people are living on their own versus how many people you are letting go. I'm not worried about how many people you are letting go, because that was a hiring problem, fit problem, whatever it is. Yeah. But definitely your good people are living. There is some other. It might be a cultural issue or an emotional issue or something else going on there.
Yeah.
And Drew, if you look at the emotional intelligence piece, this is the self-regulation and the self-awareness is coming from there. The third most important point within the emotional intelligence is motivation. And here, when people think of motivation, motivation is to do things very well, right? But here, the word motivation from emotional intelligence is more of is going the extra mile. Okay. So here, are you going back and being motivated because of the purpose or the company or the job you're working rather for than the salary or the bonus you're going after? So the discretionary effort, that is what we call motivation. So to your question, when you are a 5 employee, 10 employee organization, the entrepreneur is motivated. He will go all out to make it a success because it is their baby, their idea, their concept. They are gung-ho on that.
Yeah, they have the most to gain if it's successful as well.
Yes. And even if you put the financial side aside, let us say even a social entrepreneur. Social entrepreneur generally is not the financial piece of it. They want to make a social impact.
Yeah.
So their motivation is there because they already know the idea and that's why they got into it. But the people they're bringing in, they might be interested in it, but still it is not their baby. Yeah. It is the neighbor's baby. We can play with them for an hour, but you need to give it back. Yeah. And that is where the motivation piece comes into picture. That's where you'll see even some of the entrepreneurs, when they keep on pushing their employees and say, man, why don't you understand this? I do have a couple of entrepreneurs I've been working with. And I said, guys, if the guy had the same motivation like you had, he would have been an entrepreneur. He would not be working for you. Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. You need to think about it from that perspective.
Well, and the question that I always ask is what I believe everybody's asking me as a leader is what's in it for them. And we're going to talk about vision and vision casting and vision for your business as an entrepreneur in a subsequent episode. But the idea when you're communicating a vision, an idea, an initiative, a direction that you're going as an organization, you've got to answer the question, what's in it for them? What is in it for the individual person on your team? It's going to vary a little bit for each person. Some people are motivated. Their discretionary motivation is the income. Some it's position. It's employee of the month. They want to be recognized. It's recognition. Others, it may be loyalty and they're loyal. And so if you give them a little extra time or you take them to lunch once a year, you know, that they'll work above and beyond for the entire year. Whatever the case is, you've got to figure out what's in it for them and then make sure you're scratching that itch for them. But that happens through conversations. And I never thought of that. I've always categorized that as a vision piece and effectively communicating your vision, but really it's an emotional intelligence piece that it falls into. That's so, and I love the term you said, discretionary motivation, effort, discretionary effort. Yeah. And I have, just like you have discretionary income, I have this little bit of effort that I can decide where I'm going to place it. It's discretionary, and that's a great picture. Thank you for sharing that term with me. I hadn't heard it before.
Yeah, you're welcome. You're welcome. And then in the entrepreneur point of it, before we go to the social awareness and the social regulation, leaders who can really see themselves very well, entrepreneur who can see themselves very well and understand themselves, what will happen automatically is they can see their companies very clear because they understand themselves, their regulations, so they can see their companies very clearly. Once they see the companies very clearly, what happens? They're able to communicate that very clearly with their subordinates, with their customers, with this thing. That is where the emotional intelligence really plays a big role because they see themselves very clearly. So look at their companies very well, and then the communication. It can be with their employees, with their customers, stakeholders, whoever they're doing. They have to communicate with a lot of people.
So what you're saying is the self-aware entrepreneur is going to, when you say they see their company very clear, that means that they also see the good and the bad. They see,
Yes.
they can do a SWOT analysis and be very truthful with themselves on where they're at currently, where they want to be, but where their shortcomings are and the areas that they need to focus on and improve if they want to go to that next level, which
Exactly.
makes so much sense because if we see it all the time, if you're not aware of the shortcomings of your organization, you think everything's great because it's your organization and there's no problems, and your team's trying to come to you and say, no, we have these problems here and this is going to be a challenge, and you keep going, no, it's great because it's my organization. That is going to be devastating for you and your organization. And once again, I'd never categorize that as a self-awareness piece, but it is. I mean, it's pride, it's arrogance, it falls into all those categories.
Yes.
Not really seeing your organization clearly and then being able to articulate what needs to happen next in the organization. It's great.
Yes. So now you go into the self-regulation piece of it. Basically there, if you go back and look at it, what we say, they're able to control their feelings, right?
Yeah.
And if somebody is able to create and control their feelings, what kind of a culture do they create? What kind of atmosphere? Basically, they almost go back and create of fairness and trust.
Mm-hmm.
Because they're not really in the extremes. They're very, very
Yeah.
quiet and calm and controlled and communicate it in an effective way. So everybody feels that it was a fair discussion. Let us say if you are giving a feedback to somebody, positive or negative,
Yeah.
then people will feel trusted and they'll feel that fairness in that communication piece of it. That is where the regulation piece really comes into picture.
That's great. And that, it's backed up by research with, I got the book right here, the Leadership Challenge. The number one thing that people are looking for in a leader and in a coworker is they want that trustworthy person.
Yes.
Someone they can trust. That's what people are looking for. And so how do you build that trust? Which is how would you say, how do you build that trust? How do you build those trusting relationships in an organization? How can an entrepreneur do that?
The biggest part of it is always, number one is communication. Communicating the good news, communicating the bad news, indifferent news, whatever it is.
That's
the second piece of it is really how emotionally they regulate themselves and communicate it in an effective way.
Okay.
And when you're communicating, basically you want to be very, very comfortable in giving that candid feedback with everybody.
What if I have somebody on my team that's very young, they've never had a tough conversation with an employer before? How do I have that conversation in an emotionally intelligent way? I want to be candid with them, but I understand that maybe they might cry. They might not be able to regulate what happens because they've never had these kind of tough conversations with an employer before, or they've always been told that they've, I get this question a lot, is why I'm asking it.
Yeah.
With folks that I lead, and they say, they've never been criticized on their performance before. And so I almost want to just avoid even telling them where their performance is lacking because it's devastating to these people. What do you do in that situation?
So the number one piece of it is basically you need to build the trust with them, not just in the feedback, but overall communication trust.
Okay.
And if you display that consistently across different people, then they would understand that. How would you go back and build trust is the consistency when you're talking to different people.
Yeah.
And the second part of it is basically whenever you see somebody who is young or somebody who has not have experience or something, do a lot of the communication behind closed doors, but asking them a lot of questions. This is where the entrepreneur should be asking questions rather than giving feedback. See, one of the things when I go back and coach somebody to give senior level, junior level, the first thing I go back and tell them is for the first 15 to 20 minutes, just ask questions and draw out of them what they think.
Yeah.
The first question is, hey, how do you think your performance was for the last quarter?
Mm-hmm.
What are some of the big wins did you have? What are some of the learnings you had? So if you go back and start asking those things in a very, very self-regulated way, most of the time they're opening up comfortably. First, they're very shy. Everybody don't want to talk about their dirty laundry.
Yeah.
So they'll start talking about the positive things and okay, what can you do differently for the next quarter? So definitely that coaching kind of an approach, opening up with some good open-ended questions will get them comfortable stage and they start talking about it. And in that, if the entrepreneur is a good listener, they'll take some clues. And based on the clues, when they say this was a problem, they would go back and jump in and say, hey, can I share some information about that? And this is what I have observed. This is what it is and stuff.
Yeah.
And if they're too young and they would not follow, then they say, hey, if I was at your age and stuff, I would go back and keep asking a lot of questions so that I don't repeat it next.
Yeah. Well, and I feel like if you use that approach, you are able to find out how self-aware that person is that's on your team. Because if they think they did fantastic, but their numbers don't reflect that, then there's a lack of awareness there. And we need to determine, why, if the number is 10 and you're hitting 5 and you think that's great, where's the disconnect? How are you interpreting that that way? So that's a great way to have that conversation. And hopefully, though, the person will be self-aware and they'll come to their own recognition of, I didn't perform how I wanted to. I just don't know why I'm not able to. Okay, let's talk about that. It's not a attitude issue. It's not that they don't want to perform well. They want to perform well. They just don't know how. I can teach you how to perform better as the leader. That's great. That's fantastic.
And Drew, just talking outside the emotional intelligence, sometimes when you have the discussion, you will go back and recognize they were not even clear about what their goals were. That is when I bring in a tool called Grippy. So basically the Grippy tool is, what are the goals for the team or for your individual role or for the company, whatever sequence and whatever level of discussion is happening.
Okay.
And then, does this person understand their role in accomplishing those goals? That is the R, GR. And P is, what is the process of communication? What is the process of decision making and everything else? And that is what it is. And the I is, how are the interpersonal relationships? Where the EQ comes into picture again, is how are the interpersonal relationships? So every time a team or somebody is not working together, even if they use the Grippy approach and start talking about it from that point of view, now you're talking about it from a neutral third party kind of a point of view, rather than you did not perform, I did not perform discussion.
Yeah, that's great.
And then you can bring in the Grippy tool, really help them to come up. And then the combination of your emotional intelligence with this will really help you to accelerate that culture building and performance and whatever you're trying to accomplish there.
So say that again. GRPI, that's the acronym? Okay.
Yes.
And say the G is goals.
Yes.
The R is your responsibility.
Yes.
The P is what's your process for communication and otherwise. And then the I is, what are your interpersonal relationships with the team, whoever you're working with on a day. It might be your manager, it might be your peer, it might be your project team, depending on the scope. How are the interrelationships? If you have good communication and good interrelationships, then you accomplish your result much faster. If not, you would have some roadblocks. That's fantastic. What a great acronym there.
Yes.
So are there some questions that I can ask myself to determine? Maybe someone's listening right now and they go, I don't know, do I have a good emotional intelligence? Am I in the middle? Am I average? Am I above average? How would I determine where I'm at?
So the first thing I would say, Drew, is go ahead and call us and we'll give you an assessment and we can give you a great assessment with all the feedback. So there are very good assessments that will help you to understand where you are. So most of the time when we are working with people who wants to grow into the next level, who are not performing any of those things, depending on their people interaction and everything else and observations, we always recommend that people get an EQ assessment.
Yeah, absolutely.
So you can do a research on the Google, you can find some, if not, send us an email and we will go back and work with you on that piece of it. That's the first piece of it. The second piece of it is basically, are you spending a lot of energy in your interpersonal relationships? So when you're working on a day-to-day basis, and if you feel very tired every often, and if you think about it and say, is that coming from your role or it is coming from the people you're working? That is the first question I tell people, is reflect on that for a week. Because sometimes everybody has busy days, everybody has bad days. It can be anything. But if it is consistently ringing in the back of your mind and saying that I'm really, really tired, and most of the tiredness is coming from dealing with people, that might be an early indication that there must be something going on with your emotional intelligence piece of it.
Okay. So is emotional intelligence going to make me more of a people person, or it's going to, what's going to do if can I grow my emotional intelligence? Is that possible?
It is very, very possible.
Okay.
See, the good news about emotional intelligence is it is a skill and it is an awareness piece of it. You need to work towards it. Because if you talk about self-awareness, right? Basically, even somebody in 30 minutes of what we discussed, their self-awareness has gone up a notch, even if they like it or not. If they paid attention to the whole thing, it has gone up because now they're thinking about it and they're thinking at everything else around that.
Yeah, that there's actually body language cues, and there are ways that people might look at you and show you that they're not understanding what you're communicating.
Yes.
Yeah.
And that is very, very critical piece of that. So, Drew, I want to go back and finish up the point number 3, 4, and 5 also, which are part of the emotional intelligence piece of it. We were talking about motivation, right?
Yeah.
So for an entrepreneur, if they are already motivated because it is their idea and everything else. But if you really look at it, if the senior leadership team, he and 1 or 2 other people, they really constantly really are motivated and they keep on excelling in what they do. We know that, right? When somebody is really excelling, it is contagious and everybody else wants to excel. You create a culture of that. And that's the reason why that motivation becomes very, very important. So each one of the entrepreneurs, whenever they're really motivated and they show that in their work on a consistent basis, now they're getting their team to be motivated. And that is where they're getting 110%, 120% of their effort. The discretionary effort comes from that.
Yeah. Yeah, I like it.
Like I used to have a boss when I was in GE, and he was such a great motivator and he was such a great guy that I would do anything for him.
How though? What did this boss do that motivated you? Did he give you opportunity? Did he talk about a vision? What exactly was it that connected with you?
The number one piece of it is he understood you as a person very, very well. And number 2, he treated you with so much of respect. And doesn't matter. Basically, I'll give you an example. There was a bad performance once I had there, and I didn't do very well in one of the quarters. And I really thought he would chew my ass off. Excuse my language, but that is what it was.
Hey, it's your podcast. You can say whatever you want.
But he came in and he was so balanced and so regulated. And everything he gave you, I felt like I performed much better than what I went in with. I had action items to go back and work on for the next quarter. He said, you need to do A, you need to do B, you need to do C. But when I came out of the room, I was more confident than when I got into the room.
Gotcha. Do you think he interacted with you because he knew that you would beat yourself up more than he didn't even need to, because you would already understand, and maybe a different person, he would take a different approach? Is that kind of the leader that this guy was?
Yes. No, he was one of those guys where basically I think he really understood that some of the awareness issue I was having, because some of the aspects I was not having a skill. I was relatively new in this role. So I was still learning the role piece of it. I performed well on some aspects of the role, some was not. So he must have given me the benefit of doubt and say, you know what, let me go back and help him understand that. So we did indirectly the grippy, what I was talking about. That's the reason why it reminded me of that from my discussion, and that's why I brought it up. So he was using the grippy piece of it in the conversations and working with me around that.
Gotcha. Okay.
And that really motivated me and gave me the energy and said, you know what, I need to really excel in the next one.
Yeah.
And basically the next 3 quarters, I was super compared to the quarter I did, I was at least 2x and 3x better. So that is something that really
that's powerful.
Yes. And that is where the motivation becomes so powerful for anybody, entrepreneur, leader, business, anything to do that.
Yeah.
And now we are moving away from yourself. Like we did the self-awareness, we did the self-regulation, motivation. Now you go into the social awareness. In the social awareness piece of it is, now this is all about group dynamics, and are you able to understand the mood of the group, what is happening within the group? Until now it was one-on-one. It is internal. Now you're talking about external. You get into a room and there are 10 people. Are you able to see the group dynamic of these people? Are they comfortable? Are they open? Are they closed? And when they start talking, are you able to read between the lines?
Yeah.
And that is very critical for any leader, but especially for a growing entrepreneur, because they're meeting so many different customers. They're meeting so many different personalities within the customer buying process, right? You might have a buyer, you might have a sales guy and a finance guy, somebody else. So you're meeting multiple people.
Mm-hmm.
If you're dealing with a lot of big customers, then what you need to do is you need to go in there and you just need to understand the dynamics of the group.
Okay.
You need to be in a position to go back and understand the ability and look at and see who's coming from where and how they're coming and what they're doing. And that is the social awareness piece of it. That is even, some people go back and say empathy. They use the word empathy there as well.
Yeah.
And that becomes very critical. If you can read that, then you can go back and work with it. Or sometimes, I don't know if you have experience, sometimes the personality of some people is that you get irritated. Because I'm an entrepreneur, I know that piece of it. Some clients, they get on my nerves.
Yeah.
But you should be aware of what is happening there and how it is affecting you. And that is when you don't really go back and burn any bridges or make a fool of yourself, lack of a better term. Because even losing a deal is something, making a fool of yourself, right? Sometimes.
Yeah. Yeah, if it was self-inflicted, if it was all based on your response to something petty or something that you just perceived was a slight in a conversation or putting you down or whatever the case is.
Yes.
Yeah, I've had opportunities where it could go either way with a person, where a person essentially, criticized me or put me down to my face, and I maintain my composure and listen to their reasoning of why I wasn't competent, and gave my response of, well, if you don't think I'm competent, then that's, I'm not able to help you. But if you do think I'm competent, I can help you. And the person said, you know what, you can help me.
Exactly.
But if I would have lost my cool and said, you wasted my time, who do you think I am? And almost let insecurities overtake the moment, then I never would have had the opportunity to work with this individual. So that's a great point.
Social awareness. And again, if you look at the businesses right now, right, even small businesses, thanks to the internet and stuff, they're working and doing business globally. So they need to be in a position to go back and really understand different cultures and different people and different societies and how they intermarry. And that social awareness really helps them with that. It helps them with the global business aspect of it. It helps them with their own internal teams. And the other piece of it is when you're hiring talent management, that becomes very critical as well. So all of those would fall into the social awareness piece of it.
Okay.
And becomes very, very important for it. And last but not the least is the social regulation.
Oh, okay.
So this is where you're reading and understanding. The social awareness is you're all understanding it. Now the social regulation is how are you understanding it and how are you going back and working with them?
Okay.
Like you and me, we are almost in every time we have group dynamics because we're teaching a session of 10 people, 20 people, 15 people, 25 people. A lot of people are doing that.
New people get introduced and it changes the dynamic. I think you mentioned you had a shuffle with the training that you're doing. I've got a training tomorrow with the group, and there's some new people that have been hired since the last time I did a training with them. And so I'm expecting a different dynamic in the room. Now I know that the overwhelming majority like what I do and find value in what I do, but there's still going to be some hesitancy with these people that haven't been a part of what I've done before with the organization. So you've got to, when you say regulate that, it's how I respond to the dynamic of the group, or how I make decisions based on the information coming at me, or is it both? Okay.
Both. It is both. So it's almost like, look at it, when we talk about persuasion, influence, we talk about one-on-one relationship, right? But social regulation is almost group persuasion. How are you convincing the whole group to take action? Yeah. If you are a trainer, basically your biggest thing is if you cannot regulate and understand the group and regulate it and have a group persuasion, the team is not going to gain much. So your effectiveness reduces. And based on the dynamics, how are you going back and helping them to collaborate with each other if that is required? Yeah.
So
So
it's the old saying, read the room.
exactly.
They say
That is exactly
read the
what
room,
it is.
man.
Yes.
Nobody's likes what you're talking about right now. Read the room.
Exactly.
Or they
That
don't
is
understand.
So that all of the regulation piece of it is really understanding the awareness and making sure that you use everything else and very effectively get to the result that what you are getting there.
Okay.
Persuading group or developing expertise in teams or basically helping them to collaborate and move from A to B. Whatever the goal is, once you have the social regulation, that will really help you to get there.
Okay. That's good.
So the emotional intelligence is a circle there. Basically, you're coming up with your self-awareness, then to your self-regulation, then to the motivation piece of it. All you are driving it. So the first three are internal, coming out, inside-out approach.
Yeah.
But the social awareness and the social regulation, some people call it and address it as empathy as well, is external.
So the empathy, meaning the ability to feel what others are feeling.
Exactly.
Is essentially empathy. So can you feel the room? Can you read the room? And I would say, and then the regulation piece of that, based on the information or the signals you're receiving, can you modify your approach in the moment based on that feedback that you're getting?
Yes.
Okay. Wow. And so for some people though, that would you say that comes more naturally? Like there's people, and then there's, task people, and some people are just, they naturally have a higher emotional intelligence, whether it was how they were raised, circumstances throughout their life, someone taught them, they were born that way, whatever the case is. We can all grow for sure. But in your experience, have you seen that there are kind of two different types of people that either are all self-taught, all learned, and then some are just kind of come by it naturally?
No, you'll always have in this nature and nurture.
Okay.
Nature is some people are born with certain things. The nurture is what kind of a culture they have grown through, may it be school or family or work environment, whatever it is.
What the values were in their home.
Yes, exactly. All of those things go and have a big role in the whole emotional intelligence. But the biggest part of it is emotional intelligence can be learned. I just want to go back and stress on that piece of it.
Yeah.
And Drew, the one mistake a lot of people think is when somebody is very social, when I mean social is they're very comfortable talking to strangers, doing everything else. That skill is very different from emotional intelligence. So a lot of people combine that, and it's very easy to confuse between the two, but they're two very different things.
Yeah. Well, it's like the server at a restaurant that comes by your table and they, maybe half sit at your table and they just talk. You're like, you're trying to tell them, I'm on a date with my wife.
Yes.
I don't want to talk to you. And they just don't get the memo. They just keep on talking and they keep coming by the table and trying to make conversation. And you're like, hey, we're on a date here. Just bring us our food and refill our drinks and thank you. We don't need that. Maybe another table does. And that would be a lack of self-awareness with that person. They're a people person. They love to talk. They love to communicate. They never met a stranger, but they don't pick up on the social cues that maybe this isn't the time or the place for that.
Yeah. So for them, that would be the social awareness piece of it.
Yeah.
They're not aware and reading what you and your wife are basically looking at that particular time and everything else, or any other couple.
Right. I'm not talking about something specific that happened, right?
No.
Right.
But again, I understand.
No, I am actually.
But those are the examples, basically, Drew.
Yeah.
For people to understand the differences.
So I'm curious. Go ahead.
This person, basically, he's a social person. He wants to talk. But emotional intelligence wise, especially social piece of it, he's not very comfortable and he doesn't have the awareness. But if you really look at it from a learning perspective, somebody takes him and for 15 minutes say, hey, did you think of it from this aspect? So this person in less than 30 minutes or 45 minutes, I can spend some time and I can help him to think through so that he doesn't repeat it next.
So the foundation of growing in self-awareness is like anything else. You have to be teachable. You have to be open to learning new things. You have to be open to trying new things. I am curious, have you ever ran into somebody that I guess, can you regress in your self-awareness? Can you, or in your emotional intelligence? Have you ever met somebody that did very well at emotional intelligence, but then they went backwards? I guess what I'm getting at is it takes effort to use emotional intelligence.
Mhm.
Do sometimes people just stop wanting to put in the effort and they regress in their emotional intelligence, or is that a thing?
No. There are people. Basically, I can give you one example from one of my past jobs.
Okay, I was hoping you could.
So basically, this guy was very, very good. He was a good design engineer. And you know what he does? Design airplane parts. Very
Okay.
important, right?
Yeah.
Outstanding guy. He has over 160, 170 patents.
Wow.
And he was very good. Great career, 15, 20 years. I met him only a few times. But what happened was he was denied a lot of promotions. He was denied a lot of things. And that happened for 4, 5, 6 years because he was very good with everything else, but his overall communication, language, and style was not the best.
Mm.
And he lost 3, 4, 5 opportunities to grow in the business. And after that, he just gave up and he says, I just want to be an independent person. I don't want to talk to anybody. I will design, I will do my job and go.
Yeah.
And basically, for the last few years of his career, before I got moved from that division to a different division, he was just like that. He didn't want to do with anybody else. They come, they ask him a question. He said, I'm working on it. It'll be ready tomorrow. Come and take it. Or it'll be in this folder, take it. And that's all he did. So he comes, he technically was having 0 friends in the company. But he was good. He was one of the best from a patent perspective, design perspective, and he could live in his role. That is not fine. But again, if you look at it from an outside, his social life looks like it stinks.
Mm-hmm.
But people say, okay, well, maybe he has great friends at home and from his personal life, and he's happy with it. In the work, now he's coming for a paycheck because he was really affected with something else going on.
Mm-hmm.
So I have seen one particular case. I remember that very, very well.
Yeah. Yeah, I can totally see that. And that's why I was wondering. I did feel like, as we were discussing it, this is a matter of motivation, your own internal desire. Do you want to, not everybody, like we talked about before, not everybody's cut out to be a leader as well.
Yes.
But if you're an entrepreneur, then part of your response, I guess you can only go so far if you're an entrepreneur that just wants to create something that maybe you can sell the patent to, and you can move on and create something else. You're kind of destined to be a solopreneur, which is going to put a cap more than likely on how big of a dream or how big of a goal you can accomplish, because those big goals, those big dreams, they require a team to get around us to accomplish. And so emotional intelligence is one of those caps, one of those lids on your leadership if you don't figure it out. So when you're starting out, you want to make a conscious effort to begin to ask questions of your team, try to understand, build that trusting environment, work to understand. A question that I ask, and tell me if this is a good emotional intelligence question or not, is I tell people when I'm coaching them, ask your spouse or someone you trust very well, someone you work with on a regular basis, what's it like to be on the other side of me? And then just shut up and let them respond. And that question, you can get some tremendous insights. My wife, so I've asked that question of my wife many times over the years. And the most recent time I asked her, her response was one word. We've been married 20 years. So she said, intense. And I thought that's so interesting. That's a great word, because intensity can be great at times.
Yes.
But intensity can also be overbearing, overwhelming, too much at times as well. And I thought, you know what? It is many times our greatest strength can also be, if we overuse it, can be our weakness. And so I love that question. I don't know. I guess you hadn't heard it. I thought for sure you'd heard of it before, but yeah. What do you think about that for a self-awareness feedback?
So that is a fantastic question to start with self-awareness. because that will go back. The only piece I would tell people is do not go back and listen with a judgment.
Yeah.
Most of the time, we want to defend that.
Yes.
So ask for specific examples and just listen.
Yeah.
Just listen. Yeah.
Because it's their experience, right?
Exactly,
It's their
exactly.
experience, not your own. And yes. We all have intentions, right? We judge ourselves by our intention and we judge others by their actions. And so they're just saying, I didn't know the intention of your heart. I just know that you're a little much. Okay. So I know nobody listening would ever think that I'm intense. No one would ever think that at all.
But that's a great question, Drew. And basically, Drew, you bring up a very good point. So basically, there is a blog article that would go along with our podcast. If people go to the blog, you just gave me an idea. I will go back and give at least 5-6 questions for each one of those questions, at least to get people started. I think that would be helpful for our listeners. So in the self-awareness piece, I will give them 5-6 questions to get started. Self-regulation, the motivation, social awareness. For each one of those things, we can go back and provide some additional questions. At least that would be a great starting point for everybody. All the listeners can go and get that there.
Absolutely. So we'll have, we can get that blog just put in the description for the podcast. Yes. We can get that link there so people can find it. And we also have an email address in there. If you want to shoot an email, Raj mentioned earlier, if you want to actually get an assessment done, Raj is certified in those emotional intelligence assessments and has been doing it for many, many years. So that information's all in the description. You can get it below. Well, any parting thoughts, anything you want to say to the entrepreneurs out there that are, maybe they're on the fence and they go, I've got so many things I've got to focus on. I've got to learn all these different things to try to move my organization forward. Why should I put an emphasis or a focus on emotional intelligence?
So to answer your question, I'll give an example of a little bit of basically napkin analysis I have done. Okay. I want to clarify that it is not with full-blown research data. But anytime people have spent about 5 to 10 hours really working on their emotional intelligence with the intent of really learning and changing, they have seen at least 10 to 12% productivity in their situation, with their relationship, with meeting with their team members or with the clients or somebody else. So they look at the world very, very differently. It's almost like you drove your car through a muddy, rainy situation where windshield is all dirty, and suddenly you got the emotional intelligence and now you have a clean glass where everything is so visible. So definitely
it changes how you make decisions and how you go down that path. That's a great illustration.
Exactly. And that is what this happens. Even 5 to 10 hours can really go back and bring a huge impact on it.
It's fantastic. Great. Well, I mean, we just gave you about 45 minutes of information on emotional intelligence. So hopefully that helps you maybe get 1% better or more productive in the workplace after listening to that. You read that blog that Raj has and bam, there you go, another percent. But I hope that everybody listening has found value in this episode today of the Raj and Drew Show for Entrepreneurs. And stick around, watch some other episodes, some past episodes, and we will see you on the next episode.
Thank you, everybody. All the best.